With shootings being a regular occurrence and bigotry being ever present, there is a major push to restrict what people can say and do. The banner that flies over these issues is hate, hateful speech and hateful violence. The problem invoked by this, though, is what counts as hate and how it should be enforced. In America, there is no such thing as hate speech under the Constitution, but there is such a thing as a hate crime. Personally, I don't believe in either, or rather, I believe that they exist in such a broad definition that to point them out would be redundant. In my opinion, free speech is not there to protect popular ideas. The entire point of free speech is to allow dissent, to give the populace the ability to be an asshole. To this end, any legislation against hate speech would be antithetical to the core value of American discourse. The counterpoint tends to be that hate speech incites violence and is harassment. I disagree with that on the basis that harassment is when you go out of your way to pursue and bother someone, which is already illegal, and that inciting violence is making threats in a specific manner, which is also already illegal. The issue at hand is where the line is drawn before an insult becomes harassment and/or the incitement of violence. As an example, let's say a black man walks up to a white man and asks for the time, and the white man says, "Fuck off, nigger." Is this harassment? I can't really say so because the white man didn't pursue the black man, it was the reverse. Is it an incitement of violence? Perhaps the claim could be made, but no worse than if he said "fuck off, asshole," which isn't considered enough to warrant a physical retaliation under the law. Now, I agree that the man in question would be an asshole. That's no way to talk to someone, especially a stranger with such a mild inquiry, but I don't think such an interaction should be handled by the legal system. What if both parties were black? Let's say the second man, now black, is very racist against black people. Does that change the scenario? Many would say yes, but I don't think it should. Racism is racism, but in many minds this person would get a pass because they are black, which is in my opinion racist in and of itself. The example I provided would definitely be on the radar for hate speech. Not the example itself, but that I provided it. Saying nigger in this context of a hypothetical ethics question is not permissible by the general public. Uttering the word is seen to be intrinsically full of hate and to encourage the unfair treatment of black people. Under this logic, I would be guilty of hate speech, despite not actively encouraging any such thing and not actually holding any such views. This stifles dialogue, and I profoundly disapprove of any such regulation. But moving beyond race, we have gender politics. It is considered hate speech to misgender someone. Some view any instance as such, while others add the caveat that it must be intentional. I again do not think either should be. If when you interact with a trans person in your daily life you insist on calling them by the opposite of the gender they identify as, you are probably a major asshole, but you are not guilty of harassment. It is only harassment when you hunt for this person, you hover outside their home, or you time out when they go to the store so you can purposely run into them. At the least, if they are sitting at a booth and you walk over to them and bother them, that would still be harassment. These things are already illegal. It does not matter why you did it, it matters that you did it. The bigotry could be brought up in question to your mental state, perhaps you are frothing at the mouth and being entirely incoherent, but the bigotry itself should not be a charge as it is an opinion, and in the perseverance of free speech, opinions should not be regulated. If you are a male-to-female trans, and you go to the store and the cashier says pointedly, "Have a nice day, sir," you could and should take it up with the manager and have them deal with it internally. But the cops should not be called down the cashier who at worst is just an asshole. The debate about stores providing services, such as wedding cakes for gay weddings, is a whole other ballgame I won't get into. Hate crimes in general perplex me. If you find out that your wife is cheating on you and you fly into a rage and kill the man, this is not a hate crime. It's a murder to be sure, and a premeditated one depending on how long you wait, but not a hate crime despite being filled to the brim with hate. If the reason you were mad enough to kill him was because he was a Mexican, however, then it magically becomes a hate crime. I'm not sure how to fully explain why this doesn't make sense to me because it seems obvious on the face of it. It doesn't matter why specifically you killed someone, it only matters that you killed them. We do have caveats to adjust the sentencing, such as crimes of passion, which are done in the moment at a heightened emotional state, but there isn't to my knowledge any distinctions for each specific form that could take. Maybe you were being cheated on, maybe your dog was killed, maybe there was an intense, personally damaging argument. These things may be taken into account, but unless you are defending yourself or otherwise forced, you will be charged with a generalized crime. Not pet vengeance or she brought up his abusive father. All that will be accounted for in the end is if you were aggravated in general in the moment or if you planned it from the beginning. To regulate the individual reasons themselves would be thought policing. To put it another way, and to get away from legal mumbo-jumbo, which I don't claim to be an expert on, if you assault someone because you don't like the way they look, this is just assault and is very much so illegal. If you assault someone because they are specifically a race you don't like, that is also assault, which is again very much so illegal. To add the charge of a hate crime is to add an unnecessary level of punishment. If it seems likely that you will continue assaulting people, they don't need to charge you with a hate crime, they can just keep you from getting parole on that assessment of your state. Therefore, I can only view the concept of hate speech and hate crimes to be a form of thought policing and a method for the government to regulate the opinions of the populace. Furthermore, the addition of unnecessary extra charges can only be seen as a revenge ploy, and I have an extreme distaste for using the legal system to get revenge on people you have a personal hatred for. It clogs up prisons and courthouses and keeps cops distracted, preventing each from appropriately doing their job of keeping society safe. None of this is to say people should be free of any consequence. When Roseanne Barr made her tweets, it was completely idiotic and I don't necessarily blame ABC for firing her. Do I think she is actually racist? No. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think she's just an inflammatory nutcase on Ambien. But that doesn't change that when you work for a company, you represent that company, and if they don't want to be represented by the outlandish things you say, they have every right to fire you. I wish they hadn't, but I get it. Personally, I was more bothered that they rebooted her show without her and killed off her character and the cast all threw her under the bus. But that is neither here nor there. Lastly, I will talk about Twitter and YouTube, because hate is the basis on which many are banned from these platforms. I have waffled back and forth on this topic because on one hand I think private businesses can conduct themselves however they want within the law, while on the other hand these two sites have become far too big to be treated merely as private entities. Many people make their living on YouTube only to be demonetized or have their channels deleted for nebulous or unfairly enforced reasons. YouTube again and again claims to be working towards more transparency while the site continues to eat itself, and creators' livelihoods get destroyed in the process. And to those saying YouTube isn't a real job, yes it fucking is. I don't make any money off my channel and I'm limited in the quality of video I can produce, but the work I've put into this has regardless been immense and extremely frustrating, so the people who have made this into their full-time job are undoubtedly working their asses off. To think that all that work can be undone by an automated system unfairly enforcing rules you may or may not even be breaking frankly pisses me off. As for Twitter, it is undeniable that that is where the public discourse takes place now. Freedom of speech is intended for you to freely participate in discussions and proclaim your ideas in the open. The world has moved down a one-way path where any significant event is discussed online and specifically on Twitter. Even the President of the United States gives a large portion of his statements on Twitter. So while I support the rights of private businesses, it can no longer be denied that Twitter has outgrown that, just like other major utilities. Personally, I think the best solution would be for the government to work out a deal with Twitter or buy it out and make it a publicly funded website. Then it would be enforced, ideally, as a free speech platform protected by the First Amendment. Now we're at the end, so I'll take a moment to acknowledge that this video probably will be unpopular. To that I say, oh well. This channel wasn't, isn't, and will never be about capitulating to my audience, so if you liked the video or if you hated it but are capable of civil discourse about it, hello, you're more than welcome here. But I'm not going to change to please the masses. I'm also going to refrain as much as I can from declaring hatred of anyone. This is not self-censorship, I'll still freely express my opinions and hate will be part of that, but I've begun rethinking how I tackle the world in general, and hatred just isn't something with any use to me. It is my strong opinion that you do not solve hatred by convincing your enemy that they are monsters, but by convincing them that you are not. This is why I try, and fail all the time, to provide as many angles to a topic as possible, which is bound to enrage people but makes it impossible to claim I am wholly on any one side. I do not think protecting your border is racist. I do think the wall is a waste of money. I do not have anything against the Jewish people. I do have a problem with the Jewish faith, as I do with all religions. I do not think there needs to be 15 gender labels. I do not care how you label yourself, and I will call you whatever you want. I do not think women should be treated differently from men. I do not call myself a feminist because that's not what the word means to me. There is a difference between being a centrist or a fence rider and being nuanced. The us versus them mentality creates an artificial binary when humans are actually made up of countless opinions, many of which are shared between people who view each other as being the opposite sides of good and evil. The additional charge of a hate crime protects no one and serves only to facilitate revenge, which is itself based in hate, and hate cannot defeat hate.